Hello folks, and welcome back to another TTRPG product spotlight. Today in the mail I got from the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay line, Enemy in Shadows, Death on the Reik, and Power Behind the Throne, parts 1, 2, and 3 of the Enemy Within campaign. Enemy Within campaign is sort of the classic Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay campaign, which is pretty legendary in the circles that play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I am not a native Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay player, nor am I a Warhammer player in general. I've never played Warhammer. I don't really operate in that space. However, what I've read, I'm very interested in. I like the vibe of the Warhammer Fantasy world as opposed to the D&D one. These are the new versions that Cubicle7 has been producing. I believe these are for the 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. It doesn't really say anywhere on the books. But that's fine. I don't care because I'm not going to be running it using Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I'm going to use Outcast Silver Raiders. Let's just go ahead and dive right in. Now these books are all very big. I think they're all about 160 pages, so I'm not going to have time to go through all of them. I'm mostly going to focus on this first one, which is now called Enemy in Shadows. It used to be called Shadows over Bogenhafen, but it's the same book. Most of the material in here is, from what I'm told, basically identical to the original. First, we have this huge map, which is great. We have the foreword, we have the credits. One of the key things of the Enemy Within campaign is the introduction of the Purple Hand cult, which is a group of cultists who they pray to chaos, which is like a big deal in the Warhammer world. There are sections that tell you the basic vibe of the Warhammer world, which is great, given that I'm not going to be reading any of the core rulebooks for this. And then it immediately starts with starting the adventure. I have read this part of the adventure before because I thought I was going to run it one day, and then everybody canceled that day, so I didn't do that. Basically, the players start in an inn, and then they leave on a coach that is going toward somewhere else, and everything else sort of goes out from there. We have portraits for all of these NPCs, everything going on in this first one. Honestly, this looks very well laid out if you were playing in the Warhammer Fantasy system. I'm not, so a lot of these stats aren't going to mean anything to me. To my knowledge, Warhammer is basically a D100 roll under system, so I can at least use these skills, and I could just roll D100 under those if I wanted to, if I needed these skills for whatever reason. Then eventually you get to Altdorf, which is the biggest city in the Warhammer Old World, in the Empire. It looks like there are lots of different options you can use to make your campaign a little bit different, which is useful and good if you've ran this before, or your players know it well, or you just don't like the way NPC is portrayed by default. By chapter 4, they are on the way to Bogenhafen, which is where most of the action in this book is going to take place. There are also black powder weapons in the Warhammer setting. I don't know that I'm going to be using those, but I'm not that worried about it right now. We'll figure it out as we get there. So Shadows over Bogenhafen actually gets its own section that starts with this great piece of art. It looks like this goblin is being possessed by this demon or something like that. Another key element of the Enemy Within campaign is that early on the players find a body of a guy who looks exactly like one of them, and they have a note that says they're about to get a big inheritance, which is one of the motivating factors for the campaign. Another thing that happens is there are lots of festivals and carnivals that happen in the Warhammer world, and these happen pretty frequently. Power Behind the Throne, the 3rd book in the series, a lot of this stuff, they're just D10 rolls and have all sorts of stuff going on. You can use this in whatever system, it doesn't matter. Once the players finish up in Bogenhafen, they'll move on to Death on the Reik, which is part 2 of the Enemy Within campaign. Death on the Reik is a large river crawl. I'm not sure if in this version it's a hex crawl, but essentially the players are going to go up and down the river while they search for a haunted castle. It sort of doesn't look like in this version that it's a hex crawl, but that's okay. I can improvise that part and add it and make it a hex crawl if I want. Every one of these little dungeons are detailed, just like the way that they would be in a big hardcover 5e adventure or something from 2e. In my opinion, the enemy within campaign is kind of a lost link between the open sandbox style or location-based old school play and the quote-unquote trad movement adventures of the late 80s and early 90s that we're more familiar with in 5e and stuff these days. This is very much the beginning of that. And if you're kind of annoyed by the way that this information is presented or the way that it's written, a lot of it is the same as it was back then. So this is a vintage legacy style product. So you might not get some of the modern concessions that you might want, but that's okay for me. I wanted a big classic adventure that was like this. Yeah, it looks like the main way that everything is laid out here is basically from point of interest to point of interest. So it's almost like not just a point crawl, but actually the point crawl part becomes the important part. Getting from this city to that city on the river is where we see a lot of the action. Then we have Castle Wittgenstein, which is the castle that they're looking for. There are a couple other castles on the map that basically act as red herrings so that the players don't immediately beeline for, oh, we're looking for a castle? There's the castle on the map. I'm guessing that I might have to do some work to convert some monsters, but I'm not that worried about it. Here's the map of the castle. This is wonderful. Look at that. A key with the whole list of rooms. Okay, there's 60 rooms. Castle room contents table. Honestly, you could steal this straight up. I might steal it. You could just take the whole table and put it in your game. I might do that. Looks like somebody is summoning a demon lady here. Cool. Honestly, as I flip through and look through this is a way cooler castle than Castle Ravenloft ever was, in my opinion. One thing that I think is different in this version compared to the original is there used to be a large appendix of random encounters, and I'm not 100% sure where that is in this version of the book. They might have moved it to one of the companion things that they made or something like that. I'm not sure. I'll have to do a little more research. They do have every handout here, including all of the dungeons and the map areas. So this is great, because this is obviously going to be... number one, you could just copy this if you wanted to, but also these are all going to be included with the PDF, so I could just print these out if I wanted to and lay them down on the table. Perfect. That's exactly what you want. I hate having to hunt around for unlabeled player versions of the maps. So the fact that these are all included here, that's what you want. Good job, guys. Finally, we're going to look at the third part of the Enemy Within campaign, Power Behind the Throne. This is sometimes been called a court crawl. It takes place in Middenheim, a huge city. Unlike the first two, which had a big map of the area, it seems this book takes place entirely within the one city. Of course, the first thing you have to do is get there, so they've included the road to Middenheim, which some of this actually looks like it's repeated information from the end of Death on the Reik, which is fine, because you would want to connect those adventures, and if you hadn't run through Death on the Reik, you could actually pick up right here in the same way. One problem that people sometimes have with this adventure is that it's a lot of talking to people and a lot of social interaction, and not necessarily a lot of combat. Which, if you're playing Warhammer Fantasy, you might be interested in that. The players might be more used to busting orc skulls and fighting undead and stuff like that. I actually like this section that says, for Grognard's the villain, that says, hey, maybe you've played the Enemy Within campaign before, or you've heard about it, so you already know who the bad guy is. Here are some options that you can use instead. Much like changing how the NPC acts in the first book. The players eventually are going to discover that there's a big taxation problem in Middenheim. There's basically a vote on whether or not to tax this certain class of people, and as you unravel why you wouldn't vote in one way or another, they discover, oh, there's a bunch of monsters and a big cult, and everything is evil, it turns out. One of the big things that happens in this module is there's a carnival. So, of course, there's a great carnival events table, stadium events, all sorts of stuff you can do. Ticket prices, Dwarf Valley choirs, the truest of dwarf music. I mean, you could have a lot of fun just handing this sort of stuff out to your players. You could get a couple weeks out of this. But then when they go to those, they're going to encounter various NPCs. There's almost like listings of where the characters are going to be so that the players can go find them. If they need to go find somebody or talk to somebody, then they're going to have to do it where they're at. There's a little bit of that Majora's Mask scheduling stuff going on, which is neat. And of course, Skaven are there, which is great. Who doesn't love Skaven? Ratman. And then literally, like, the last, 40 pages or so are just NPC summaries telling you, hey, this is what this guy's deal is. Hey, this is who this guy is. Hey, this is who this guy is. Super useful. You might even be able to give some of this out to the players, especially because every one of them comes with art and has a name. So you might want to print out a bunch of that and just hand them to the players and be like, it's this guy. He looks like this. I would have to read some of these to see how much of this information is GM-only information that the players shouldn't see, or if I could just give this out and the players be like, oh, okay, it's this guy. That's his deal. Here we go. Appendix 5, Master Attractions Calendar. So this helps you keep track of what's going on when during the festival. Help, I am prisoner of these men. Look at this. It's basically a relationship map. Perfect. This is the kind of stuff that you need to effectively run this sort of adventure. So them providing it is perfect. So I did not pick up parts 4 and 5 of the Enemy Within campaign. Why not? Number one, I was already spending, I think, like $80 just on these 3 books, which is on sale pretty good. I'm really happy with the quality of that. I don't regret my purchase at all. Even if I end up not running this, which my plan is to run this year as one of my 2 major campaigns, which as soon as me and my wife recover from being sick, I'm going to start that up for my home game. But the thing is, number one, we're basically going to try out running this in Outcast Silver Raiders and see how we feel about the whole thing. I definitely want to run at least these first 2 parts. I'm really interested in the 3rd part, but if by the end of Death on the Reich, the players are like, no thanks, we did that, we're good, then whatever. But now I at least have the classic trilogy intro in physical format, and I can run it however I want forever. The thing is, I don't know about part 4, but I know that part 5, there was a lot of controversy regarding the original release of that. I think they changed editions partway through, or something happened with it, and it didn't come out that great, or people didn't like it, and now the new version is a different version of that, or something like that. I don't know the whole history of the last one, so that's why I didn't get it. I'll figure that out later. At the end of the day, if all I really need is a big mega dungeon, I can make that work. If that's how I want to end my campaign, which is probably what's going to happen. Once this is all over, they'll go to a big mega dungeon and have fun doing mega dungeon stuff when they're like, I don't know, 5th, 7th, 8th level. We'll see how long this takes and what goes on with it. I'll keep you updated once I start playing at the end of these videos. That's all for now. I'm not sure when I'm going to get something else in the mail. I bought these at the end of last year, so I'm not sure when another one of these videos is going to come. When something gets in the mail, you'll get notified. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Black Lives Matter, trans rights are human rights. ACAB. Don't kill the part of you that's cringe, kill the part of you that cringes. And stay gold.